associated with Chovei Torah is an institution called Yeshivat Maharat, which is effectively a women's seminary where women graduate with the title of Maharat, which is a I forget what it's an acronym for, but it was a title that basically designated women who were women rabbis. This title came about after there was one woman who was ordained as a rabbi, and she was given the title Rabbah. That created a whole controversy in its own right, and the person who ordained him, Rabbi Avi Weiss and so forth, agreed to the fact that he will no longer give women the title of Rabbah, which was the feminization of rabbi, but the title Maharat.
What is I'm sorry, what does Maharat actually mean?
It means more.
It's an acronym.
It's an acronym.
Right.
Okay. The fact is this touches upon another issue, which is the issue of the Yoetzet Halacha, which came out of which was connected to what do you call it, to Nishma in Israel. Pardon?
In Pat, in Yerushalayim.
I'm sorry?
Shchonat Pat in Yerushalayim. That's where Nishma is located.
Oh, okay. Okay, Nishmat, which is on the Rebbetzin and Henkin, and they pray to Yoetzet Halacha, which actually you find in New York City, that there are certain synagogues who have hired Yoetzet Halacha, which basically means halachic advisor, as when they've looked for assistant rabbis. So there are certain shuls in New York City, certain Orthodox shuls in New York City, that have hired graduates in Nishmat Yoetzet Halacha as in positions that are very similar to the assistant rabbi position. In fact, they basically had assistant rabbis and basically said, listen, instead of the assistant rabbi, let's get a Yoetzet Halacha, and women as Yoetzet Halacha have taken positions which basically is similar to assistant rabbis. The Yoetzet Halacha is much more accepted. There are people in the city who actually are in Toronto who are graduates with Yoetzet Halacha, and they're much more accepted by the general Orthodox community and so forth. So part of the controversy with Maharat is, why is it the Maharat is much more controversial, although Yoetzet Halacha has its own controversy as well. So that's basically was the topic that was raised and so forth. What the topic really is all about is women in Judaism. That's what we're really talking about. And this is just another example of the issue of women in Judaism. And the fact is that's a topic that is dealt with and not dealt with. I'll be very blunt. I think the fact is that it's a topic which basically is sort of there, and no one really wants to really meet it head on. Because the topic of women in Judaism is much broader, much more extensive than people think it is, and really demand a complete reinvestigation of how we think in many, many issues. What's not recognized, and I'm sort of being extensive, is that the whole gay rights issue is tied to women in Judaism. The whole same-sex issue is tied to women in Judaism. Okay, marriage is tied to women in Judaism. Every definition of a human being is tied to women in Judaism. Okay, love is tied to women in Judaism. The fact is that people don't really understand how extensive the issue of women in Judaism is, and people furthermore don't understand that most of the answers given on the topic of women in Judaism, if they were given in the halachic issues, would be laughed at as ridiculous. And I'm being very blunt about this. I spend a lot of time studying women in Judaism, and there are answers that are presented in terms of women in Judaism. If they were presented in almost any other halachic issue, people would say, What are you talking about? You know, like for example, let me give you an example. People throw out the argument that women aren't commanded in pruruvu. They're not commanded in having children. Only men are commanded in having children. Women are not commanded in having children, right? Because of pruruvu. Okay? So the point being is that obviously, what does that mean? Well, how can men be commanded, women not be commanded? How does that work? And but it seems to be this straightforward. I mean, it's actually a machlokes in the Gemara. There's actually a sheet in the Gemara that women are commanded, but basically the halacha is women are not commanded in the commandment of pruruvu. Okay. Now, one answer is given. So one answer is given that well, they don't need the commandment, since women already have a natural predisposition to want to have children. They don't need to be commanded to have children. Theory being that men don't have this natural predisposition, that's why they need to be commanded. That's a classic answer that is given. Right? Okay, you've all heard, have you heard that answer before? Okay. Now what's the problem with that answer? I heard that answer and I said to say, do you understand what you just said about commandments? What you just said about mitzvot? Yeah, Jacob, what were you?
Well, I'm saying the notion that a group has a predisposition, that might be correct. But what about, women that don't have a predisposition? Or what about men who have a predisposition? Why do they have to be commanded?
So you're challenging on the substance. Is it really true that every woman has this predisposition? As a general idea. But I'm thinking just in the word of the concept of mitzvot. The concept being...
Why can't the person who has a predisposition is going to still get the reward of doing the mitzvah?
Or you're basically making the assumption that God only gives commandments when you have a predisposition to do it, or when you don't have the predisposition to do it, right? But if you have a predisposition, there's no need for a commandment. That's what your basic assumption is. Okay? That's very, very nice. Nice theory. Does it work? What about all the what?
What about all the other mitzvot then?
Right. What about all the times when people say, well, naturally, the truth of the matter is there's a Rashi in Makot, the Gemara Makot. The Gemara Makot says, the Gemara makes a famous statement. Okay, the Mishnah Makot says that Ratzakash Baruch Hu Zachetz Yisrael. God wanted to benefit the Jewish people. Hebrew Aleim Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, He gave him a tremendous amount of Torah and mitzvot. Okay, good. The only problem with that is you have more Torah and mitzvot, you have more mitzvot, so there's more chance to get rewarded, but a more chance of also botching up, making mistakes. So why is it having more mitzvot basically means that it's better to have more mitzvot because there's a chance. So it's a classic question. So Rashi's answer is God gives the commandments that you're going to do anyways. So Rashi and Makot. God gave commandments that you're going to do anyways. Like for example, there's a mitzvah that says don't eat don't eat an animal that's been an animal that's a carcass on the street. Walk by a carcass, the carcass has bugs all over it, blah 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 blah. You walk by that carcass and you don't eat it, you get a mitzvah saying I didn't eat that meat. You're not going to eat it anyway. It has bugs all over it. It's disgusting. Rashi says that gives you a mitzvah. So the truth of the matter is Rashi tells you that God gives mitzvahs that you're going to do anyways. So how can you understand this statement of that God gives you a mitzvah you normally would do? Okay? So the point is that answer is remarkably problematic. That happens throughout issues of women in Judaism. Almost so many of the answers given to women in Judaism are, yeah, you throw it out, and it's almost like you take it even in terms of having kids. That's very nice. Women don't need a mitzvah. But everyone, if you go into any girls' school, go into a Beis Yaakov school, what do they tell you the number one function of a woman is?
Having children. Having
children and being a mother. But you don't have a mitzvah. Not only that, the Mishnah in Kedushin says not only do you don't have a mitzvah to have the children, all the mitzvahs on raising children are only on the men and not the women. That's a Mishnah in Kedushin, in Masechet Kedushin. All the mitzvahs of Ben Alav, only for men, not for women. Therefore, women don't have. Women don't have. If a woman, for example, something happens and the father's not in town, or the father, Rahman al passes away, woman gives birth to a child. Okay, child's a boy. 8 days comes around, right? Okay, so does a woman have an obligation to do a mila on to arrange for a mila on her son? No. No. Woman has no obligation. Woman has no obligation. There's actually an issue. There's a whole issue of women may have, whether a woman has an obligation of chinuch on their child. All the mitzvahs of raising, even the mitzvah of feeding your kid. The mitzvah of feeding your kid is only on the on the father, not on the mother. Okay. Now the truth is, as you look at this, and then everyone says this issue of well, the tafkid of a woman is mothering. There's no mitzvah. Now the only person I ever saw ask that question, besides myself, I've always had that question. The only person I ever saw is Rabbi Moshe Meiselman asked that question in his book on women in Judaism, and I don't like his answer. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Okay, the fact of the matter is that. But the point is all these answers are given on women in Judaism, and the truth is that the real depth, it's not there. So the truth of women in Judaism is a real problematic issue, and this is part of it. This whole issue, the Maharat, is just touching the surface of really the other problems you see with the Yetzirah Halacha and so forth. Yeah, Jacob, you wanted to?
Yes, the idea that people would do certain things in mitzvot anyway.
Yeah.
I'll take two items. I think our mitzvot that we have that I think it's fairly clear that maybe in today's world people wouldn't necessarily do keeping Shabbos, and people do it, and keeping kashrus.
They wouldn't do it.
No, so I say the people
who do it like doing it.
So because it's a mitzvah or something like that.
Yeah, that's all part. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of different reasons. How many people really do a mitzvah because they feel the command?
Well,
okay.
I feel obligated because there is a command,
but you do it anyways.
Yeah, I do it anyway,
yeah.
I guess, but I wouldn't necessarily reserve my seventh day.
Okay, so that's a command. That's where you say, I structure my life differently because God told me this.
Right. So right. The idea that you suggest that women who do something anyway, therefore you don't have to command them to do it. I think that's why I think it's a fallacious.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of issues with it. And the truth of the matter is maybe you need commands just to give the idea that it's a good idea to do this. Yeah.
Does that 8-day-old boy have an obligation on himself to have a milah? In other words, even though the obligation may not be on the woman to arrange it or to be obligated in making
the obligation, you can't have an obligation on a cotton. I mean, in technical terms.
Understood.
Right.
But he'll come to not be a cotton.
So then when he comes 13, he has an obligation. The truth of the matter is the obligation falls on Bezdin. Okay, which moves into who has the obligation, whether it's Bezdin or whether it's a community, and whether it's every individual in Klal Yisrael, which raises the issue. There are people who say a woman has an obligation as a member of Klal Yisrael the same way as every other man has an obligation.
And who was the first woman who did milah?
That gets into a difficult situation. Yeah. It's also before Torah.
Okay.
We're not going to talk about Tzipporah. Yeah.
The first commandment after the Ten Commandments was don't do yourself a statue of silver and gold.
Yeah, right.
And what the first thing we did? We did the golden calf.
Right.
So how does it fall in the saying that it's our nature to do the mitzvot?
I didn't say it was in our nature to do mitzvah. I said specifically about that mitzvah. The people give an argument. The truth of that is not every mitzvah is our nature. That's not what I said. What I'm saying is that if you're going to argue that a person doesn't need a mitzvah because it's their nature, Okay, the argument is that women don't need the mitzvah puravu because it's their nature to generally want kids. The point is that this Rashi says just because it's your nature doesn't mean God's not going to give a commandment like that.
And you may not be successful at it, God forbid, to have a living child.
Right. That's whether you're mekayim the mitzvah or not. The point is that there's a lot. The point is a lot of answers are thrown out, and what I found of women in Judaism is there's a lot of, because it's such a because it raises a controversial issue. A lot of people like to throw out answers, and their judge of answers whether people will buy it. The truth of the matter is the real judge for an answer is whether it's consistent within the system. In other words, to argue that you don't need a command because you would do it anyways, that's a logical answer. The point is when you look at the entire system, does it follow this way or not? Like for example, people applied the same argument by Nisa Seisha's Mangrama, that women don't need a time-oriented commandments because they already have a time cycle because of their periods and so forth and so forth. What does that have to do with a mitzvah? I mean, the fact of the matter is that it's a nice little answer, but the point is that the depth of halacha is there's a difference between an obligation and the natural thing and so forth and so forth. So there's a lot of issues and so forth.
Well, what does anyone make a parallel? Are there any commandments for men? Anything that they don't command men because they have a predisposition?
No, I mean the fact is Rashi says that. Rashi makes that statement that we have examples in mitzvot where human beings would do it anyways.
So it's specific to women?
That answer for Puravu is specific for women. The point is that it's an answer that says since you're going to do it anyways, you don't need a mitzvah. And the point is the theory underlying it is that really an acceptable reasoning within Torah.
Does a woman get a mitzvah for assisting a man in doing the mitzvah?
So there are people who argue that. Okay, the point is that you're getting into many other problems in this, because the fact of the matter is you have attempts at similar types of arguments where the woman becomes obligated because she has to assist her husband in the mitzvah. But the point is if you're going to be obligated because you're assisting, then you shouldn't just want to be obligated as an assister. As an assistant, you should want to be obligated as one who actually has the obligation, especially since the woman is the one going through pregnancy and childbirth, you know?
Which is
right. I mean, the fact is that it's a lot, but especially when you then turn it around and say, you don't have the obligation, but we're going to talk to you as if this is your essential obligation. I mean, it's almost like what always hits me is it's almost like you're speaking with forked tongue. You're sort of saying you're not obligated, but at the same point in time, this is your major purpose in life, is raising children and being involved in having children and so forth. But then you tell me that the actual technical obligation isn't yours. What does that mean? Okay, so the point is I'm just throwing out the fact that when you deal with women in Judaism, what you often deal with are answers that are presented that don't go to the depth of an issue. And I just want to throw that out as we talk about the issue of women rabbis and so forth. A lot of times, it's almost like no one wants to get to the real issue. What's the real issue here? And that becomes you know, why can't women be rabbis or whatever? But the fact is the starting issue of looking at the issue of the Marat is, what is a rabbi? One of our problems is, what exactly is a rabbi? Okay, what is a rabbi? Okay, Teacher,
a decisor, a knowledgeable individual.
So the term rabbi.
It's a little bit more than that. A rabbi is the one that does psak deduction what is right or what is wrong.
Okay.
And that's a problem, because then there's someone has two rabbis have different decisions who you believe now.
So the fact is that gets into a whole other issue of how you choose your rabbi. Okay, and the fact is that the point is that Judaism, a lot of Torah thought is devoted to the idea that there is the reality of disagreement and the respect necessary as fundamental within Jewish thought to that disagreement. And the point is part of that is how you choose your rabbi, namely the person that you're going to follow in contradistinction to another person who you're not going to follow. Okay? There's the rabbi you follow and the rabbi that you by definition will not follow. And a lot of times that decision, when it says Aseh Lecha Rav, the interesting thing about that is that that's a decision that you have to make without authority of another person. You can't ask another rabbi who your rabbi should be because you're choosing a rabbi to ask that to. So the point is, Aseh Lecha Rav, which is a commandment to have a rabbi, is your decision. And by definition, it's your decision based upon your knowledge and your starting point. Okay, now, the fact is that itself leads to a whole other things. I mean, one of the things that when you ask the question of what is a rabbi and so forth, you're asking about an individual's relationship to the rabbi. Okay, whenever I go up to someone and say, why do you choose this Rav? If the person says, well, he's the biggest Talmid Chacham, I said, oh, so you're a bigger Talmid Chacham than him, so you can decide that he's a big Talmid Chacham because you know you gave him a test, right? Right? I mean, if you sit there and say, oh, I follow this person because he's big, tell me how you make that decision. You're a bigger Talmid Chacham? You're big enough to decide whether he's a Talmid Chacham or not? So, I mean, come on. The point of the matter is that no one, it's like, how do you make that decision and so forth? But the starting point is that you're getting to a point of what is a rabbi. Now the fact is if you go out there on the street, you ask what's a rabbi, what kind of answer are you going to get? What are you going to find in the dictionary? What is the rabbi? What is a rabbi? Before you get to the issue of Maharat and women and rabbi, say, okay, what's a rabbi? So the fact is that there are first a few possibilities. One is that it's a professional title. And to most people in the world, when they think of the term rabbi, they think of it as a professional title. He's a member of the clergy. Right? Okay? So the fact is, it's similar to Havdil for a priest or a minister. It's a professional, it defines a job. Right? This is a certain profession being rabbis. Right? Okay? And the way you get it is you take a course and that makes you able to do this job. Fine. That's one definition. Okay? What's another definition? Another definition is teacher. How? What? Is that a professional definition?
I think it's a word definition. Rabbi, it's supposed to, the essence of the word is to teach, isn't it? Rabbi is to teach. There's other words for teacher, but
Rav teaches.
Yes.
Okay. So you say Rabbi by teacher, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a professional definition. He's a teacher.
And he has to be obviously qualified to do that.
Okay. Now the fact is that you're right. The Rav has been connected to some teaching, but what really is the definition of the term? Does a person have to be a teacher?
He has to have gone through some certification to the level that he is knowledgeable enough to be able to teach.
So that's academic.
Yes.
Or
Okay.
maybe in terms of counseling. So if someone comes to them with
That's professional.
questions on
That's professional.
halakha, you're teaching.
Well,
you're counseling.
that counseling and teaching are two different things.
I think it's academic. In a sense, it's academic.
It's academic.
I have two nephews who are Rabbi.
Yeah.
Okay? They got their smicha, but they're not pulpit rabbis. They don't have a congregation.
Right.
They've reached that degree. They've been tested on the knowledge.
Right? So it's academic.
It's an academic.
Okay. So the fact is that there is a question whether it's a professional title, whether it's an academic title, and then the nature of the professional title. Okay? So let's look at this title Rav. Okay? The fact is that in Europe, okay, when you say like Rav, let's say Rav Chaim Soloveitchik was the Rav of Brisk. Okay, so Rav there means a professional title. Now, what was his professional job as the Rav of Brisk, the Rabbi of Brisk? What was his professional job?
Probably had some regular job, like a shoemaker or something.
No, he was the Rav of Brisk.
Had to decide halakhic questions. His top authority.
So that would be interesting too. The truth is he didn't. Brisk had a diet. The fact of the matter is that Rav Chaim rarely pasked. In fact, there's a famous story that goes that there was someone who was sick and so forth, and the Dayan of Brisk was sort of trying to figure it was on Shabbos, and you have to Mechal Shabbos to say it and so forth. So the Dayan of Brisk was sort of trying to clear a line what he should do, be Mechal Shabbos or not, and Rav Chaim just stepped in and said to his son, he said to his son, the Brisker Rav, who eventually he said to his son, Rav Elbo, he said, go run over there and do this and this and be Mechal Shabbos for this person. And the whole city was shocked because Rav Chaim never contravened the Dayan of Brisk. And the story goes that Rav Chaim basically said, listen, this was a question of Sakana on Shabbos. I, as Rav of Brisk, can override the Dayan of Brisk, but generally, being Rav of Brisk didn't mean you paskin. What was being Rav of Brisk meant? What's an interesting point is that the first response of people,
learning.
He was the head of the community.
Yeah.
Okay, his job was the executive head of the community. That's what a Rav was. Now, the truth is, a Rav also was generally, what?
Like a figurehead.
No, it was more than figurehead.
Yeah.
He was a dictator. Okay? The fact of the matter is that he was a dictator, and a lot of the issues of Rabbanim in Europe was how much the other powers let you dictate. Right? When you were Rav Chaim, you basically got away with dictating. I mean, there's stories were going. I mean, another famous story of Rav Chaim is that when someone passes away, then the order in terms of taking care of the body is whoever is basically next come, next served. Okay. So what happens? A person passed away, and then one of the Gvirim of Brisk passed away. So the community basically said, we got to take care of the chashuv person first. And Rav Chaim supposedly heard of this. He went down to where they did this, and he basically kicked them all out of the thing. And he said, "You're not here. You're not coming back here to do anything until you take care of this person first, because this is what has to be done." So he was a very powerful person. He got away with it. But the fact is that he was the executive leader of the community. Now, in addition to that, he had overriding authority of psak. If there was a dayan as well, like in Brisk, then you had a dayan who basically took care of the shalos and so forth and so forth. But the Rav could override them. Okay, and the point is that in other cities the Rav was the major posek as well. Okay, so because he was hired to be posek, but he had authority. That was his job in terms of authority. Now that's going to come back into a lot of issues with women and halacha. But the first statement of women and halacha, the first statement of a Rav is academic. It is a degree. It means that you have qualified yourself in certain studies. Yora means basically you know Yora Dei, Yad means you know Choshen Mishpat, and basically the person who gives you smicha says you have the knowledge to decide these matters. Okay. Now, what does this knowledge really mean? Okay? Does it really matter whether you have that knowledge or not? So the fact is yes, it's nice to know that a person has this knowledge and so forth, but there are many, many stories of individuals who were called upon to paskin halacha and so forth, who never necessarily had smicha. Just everyone knew that they had the knowledge. And there's a lot of cases of people who got smicha not because they passed the test, because some rabbi came up to them and said, you know something, you need a smicha because everyone knows you know what you're talking about, so I'll just write it out that you're okay because you should have some document. The bottom line is it's really a matter of knowledge. Now the truth is that leads into a very interesting question with women. Okay? What about women who have knowledge? That's why if you notice the question that I raised in terms of the Chabura is how do you address a female scholar? Okay? That was the question that I sent around. How do you address a female scholar? Okay? That, by the way, to me has always been an issue, because a lot of times you'll see female scholars referred to as doctors because they also have a doctorate. Therefore, we get away from them just being Mrs. from the fact that they use their title doctor to get away with it. You know, this way they have some kind of title that shows they have some kind of knowledge. I've always had little problems with that because it's a secular title that's being used to distinguish their doctor. I'm not going to refer to Rabbi Yoshe as Dr. Soloveitchik. He is Dr. Soloveitchik, but I think we have a more Jewish way of referring to him. Now the truth is Rabbi Michael Broyd raised this question when the whole controversy of the Maharat came up. He said, basically in an article, he said, we do need a title for female Torah scholars. That would be a good idea.
What was Nechama Leibowitz?
I was just about to go there. The fact is that the classic female scholar of our generation, of course, is Nechama Leibowitz. And how did everyone refer to Nechama Leibowitz? Nechama.
Yeah.
Now the fact is that seems to be somewhat, you know, what do you call it? Not honorable. The truth of the matter is it's familiar, but the truth is that also reflects another thing. How do we refer to the number one student of the person who received the Torah? That's the person who received Torah. How do we refer? Because we are using a term there, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. How do we refer to his number one student? What?
His personal
and how do we refer to his number one student?
His personal.
No, what's his name? Yoshua.
Yoshua.
Do you say Rabbi Yoshua?
No.
No, you say Yoshua. Okay? Okay? Right? We refer to David as David HaMelech because of his term, but the fact of the matter is that there's a side in Torah thought that if you refer to someone just by a name, that might even show even a greater amount of respect to that person. Okay? The fact is that yeah, we do refer to Avram as Avram Avinu. Notice always afterwards, Avram Avinu, right? Okay? Mordechai, we call him Mordechai. Okay?
The assumption that comes from is that everyone knows that they are respected scholars.
And also they're being as that. So the truth of the matter is, in a certain way with Nechama Leibowitz, she was actually put back on that level because we didn't have a title for her. But the bottom line is for everyone else, we do need titles. And the fact is that's an interesting way that we got away with that with Nechama. Okay? But the bottom line is, and if you ever were in a shir with Nechama Leibowitz, you understood what respect was, because the way she commanded that shir, she wasn't just like little Nechama. She was someone you for sure respected. The point but the fact is that it does raise an issue. How are we going to refer to female scholars? Now, what has occurred is the title Rebbitzin has been usurped in that regard. So I always find it interesting when you think in terms of Nishmat and refer to Rebbitzin Henkin, right, or Rabbanit or Rebbitzin. The fact is that we use that term with respect, and we use that term to reflect the respect to her. But the truth is, the term Rebbetzin just means a rabbi's wife.
Yeah.
So it's not a real term. The same way with the Hebrew Rabbanit. Now, the fact is, though, is that there are certain institutions or certain groups in Israel that throw out that title because they want to find some title to refer to women with respect. And a lot of the times, the woman who is going to be so learned happens to be married to a rabbi. So they're able to get away with it. But the fact is that's all part of the issue. How do you refer to a female Torah scholar to recognize her Torah scholarship? And then, what are the applications of a female Torah scholar? Okay, so a woman who has knowledge, can you rely upon her? There are halachic decisions.
Can a woman get smicha?
That's the problem. The issue now is can a woman actually get smicha? So the Maharat program is saying all we're doing is checking whether these women have this knowledge, and that really is also what's being done with the Yoetz HaHalacha in terms of women having this knowledge. The problem with it is the other side of the coin, which is the matter of authority. The problem that exists is that the issue with a lot of these issues, I said in terms of Rav, and the question of what is a rabbi and so forth and so forth. So one of the issues with the Maharat is that it is connected, I told you, to Chovevei Torah. So I remember talking to a graduate of Chovevei Torah, and he said that the model of Chovevei Torah is really the Hildesheimer Seminary in Germany, which was unique because it was a seminary. Most yeshivas aren't seminaries. Okay, a seminary really is to train a person to be a clergyman. That's what happens. In the Reform and Conservative movement, Jewish Theological Seminary is for people who want to become pulpit rabbis. Hebrew Union College is for people who want to become pulpit rabbis. They're seminaries. And their course is to make someone to be a pulpit for a pulpit position. It seems that the Hildesheimer Seminary in Germany had a similar goal. It was patterned to be a seminary, which is to create rabbis in terms of professional pulpit rabbis, and that the Chovevei Torah is patterned in the same way. But the truth of the matter is if you really speak about yeshivas aren't planned to be seminaries. When a person gets smicha, they aren't really trained to be pulpit rabbis. I remember when I was I remember when I was a rabbi in Kingston, New York, and a member of the community wanted me to go out there to say Kel Mali at the gravesite. I guess was the yahrzeit of one of his parents, and so forth and so forth. And we were talking, and he was talking about going to comfort the bereaved, and how you go to the seminary and to the cemetery and so forth and so forth. And he basically said, well, obviously dealing with grief and so forth, so must have been part of your yeshiva training. And I basically, sure, we learn it. What do you learn to get smicha? You learn basar b'chalav. You learn kashrus. You learn how to keep, the laws of kosher. What is really, can you paskin? Do you know Jewish thought? It's not basically how to be a pulpit rabbi, and you basically pick up on it along the way. But the fact is that the issue arises in terms of the Maharat and so forth, is that since it was a institution that someone was connected to Chovevei Torah, it was much more connected to the pulpit and rabbinate, which raised issues because of the pulpit and rabbinate. And the point is the reason it raised issues because of the pulpit and rabbinate is because of the other side of being a Rav. A Rav was the executive leader of the community. And as being the executive leader of the community, that was a matter of authority. The truth of the matter is many things the pulpit rabbis do, they give sermons. Hey, what's wrong with a woman giving a sermon? They visit the sick. Well, that wasn't, if you look at Emmanuel Jacobowitz's book on Jewish medical ethics, what rabbis ever visit the sick in Europe? I mean, that's totally a North American concept of definition of rabbis, and in terms of visiting the sick, and in terms of a lot of things that rabbis do here. But the bottom line is that it was a matter of authority. So according to the Rambam, there's an issue on women having authority. So the point is that if you think in terms, now then it raises the issue of how the Rambam says, because a woman can't be a melech. Okay, even though there are certain cases of women being a malka, the fact is that there are whole issues with that and so forth and so forth. But a woman can't be a melech. A woman cannot have that authority. So the Rambam says it's not. That's halachas of being a melech. Okay, a woman can't.
In the laws of the malchut, it says, but a woman can't do.
Right, a woman cannot be a melech.
Because of that, because she can't have that authority.
No, that's the law is a woman. No, the law is in terms of who's allowed to be a melech. A woman can't be a melech. So the Rambam says it means a woman also can have positions of authority. Okay?
Any position of authority?
It seems to be any position of authority that is similar to the authority of a king. Now that raises interesting questions today. Can a woman be a president of a shul? Okay? The Rav was once asked a question, Rav Ber Salvation was once asked a question, can a woman, when Golda Meir became prime minister, can a woman be prime minister? And his answer is, and Ben Gurion can be prime minister? I mean, the fact of the matter is, if someone's, totally, non-believer, can he be a prime minister? The fact of the matter is, the Rav would cite some question. The point is that the question exists is whether a woman can be a president of a shul. And one of the arguments is the president of the shul doesn't have the same authority as a king. Okay, so the argument is a constitutional president a woman could be, because it's not real shriras. It's not. The point is, and other people say no, a woman can't be an authority. That becomes.
Anyone ask why can a woman not?
Yeah, it's the question of any mitzvah. Why can a woman be a melech?
Why can't a woman be an aide? Why can't a woman?
Yeah, that's all those questions.
So who answers that question?
You have to look into the things. I'm trying to not answer those questions because I'm trying to avoid the question because
it's necessary if we're going to accept that a woman can't have that sort of.
No. The answer is the halacha is it's the same thing. Pork is also. Okay, so the fact is a woman can't have an extension of that halacha is according to the Rambam she can't have authority. Okay, now the point is then you're asking questions. Okay, why on the halacha? Now the point is that there comes to the question of what authority can she have. So some people understand the Rambam to mean it's only authority that is absolute that she can't have. But authority that is similar to the authority we have in our world today, such as the president of the shul, she could have. Other people say no, she can't even be a member of the board because they say the Rambam means any type of authority. So once you're a board member, you have a little bit of authority. That's halachic questions. Why a woman can't have authority, it's the same reason why a woman can't be a witness, or why a woman can't be a judge. Although there is a Tosfos that says a woman could be a judge. What?
Isn't Devorah a judge?
Yes, so the question is how is Devorah a judge? So there is a Tosfos that does say a woman could be a judge. Most people say that Devorah wasn't really technically a judge. That when she sat in judgment, basically she sat there and there was Dayanim, and they sit there and say, okay, what's the answer? And they turn to Devorah and say, what do you think? Because you have more knowledge than us. And Devorah would come back and say this, and then they'd sit there and say, okay, let's follow what Devorah says. Okay, that's the classical answer. The question also.
That's still authority.
What?
That's authority.
Well, the point is therefore, if you look at Rashi and Shoftim, it says that in that world, the fact is that Devorah was the person who was most competent, and therefore she had to be in charge, and that was really a problem. And there was people say, Nebuch, and it was Rashi basically says that's how bad the generation was.
She's the most competent and most qualified. What difference does it make what her gender is?
So that could be
That's a different question.
that
That's
could
the woman's
benefit.
that,
No, but that's what they were saying. They were saying, well, what
Yes.
do you think? And then she gave her
That's
answer,
right.
and they said, okay, that sounds good.
right. So
But
the
it's
fact
still
is
felt to them
so the
to
fact is
render for the
yeah.
purpose
So the
of
fact
the
is
community
it was a
the
way.
answer.
In other words, she didn't really have the authority to say the answer, but she had the knowledge. So that basically raises the issue of the knowledge.
So somebody
fact
else
is-
tried to explain
so
How
the-
do you separate that then?
So that gets.
Biblically versus
So the point
modern.
is that gets into an issue with. And by the way, this
How do you
ties
get out
into
of here without
this-
losing your head?
this ties into the issue of psak, by the way. The fact of the matter is the difference between the judge on the court and the person with the knowledge. The point is that if you, for example, Minchas Chinuch says that when it comes to Achri Rabbim Mahatos, Achri Rabbim, you have to follow the majority of scholars on the decision. He makes the emphatic statement, of course, that if there are female scholars, they have to be included in the count. Okay? There's a difference between the authority of scholarship and authority of position. What happens in the case with Devorah is basically that you have a din Torah and there's 3 judges. Okay? That's the authority of the position, the Bezdin. Okay? Then there's a question of the knowledge. So the point is, when you ask the psak from a posek, okay, the question exists, is that posek basically, what's the authority of that posek? The authority of that posek comes from the knowledge, not from the position. So this is, by the way, one of the issues that exists in the Yoetzet Halacha issue, and also a little bit into the Maharad issue. The point is, if a woman paskins, is that a matter of the authority that is prohibited by the Rambam? So some people say yes, because it becomes an authoritative position. The person is taking some authority. Other people say no. It's a matter of knowledge. It's not an authority position.
Okay, but then
Okay.
as Yossi just said,
Right.
using deductive reasoning by
Yeah.
definition,
Yeah.
the definition is articulated earlier, and
So-
a woman can be a scholar,
Right. So
then parking the Rambam, she could be designated as a rabbi.
No. The point is that as a rabbi, as an academic title, the point is Rav. When I said there's position of Rav of the city, that becomes a positional title, a professional title. There'll be a problem with saying a woman has the executive leadership power of the position. But if there was a woman who was a scholar, right? And the fact of the matter is people say, listen, she knows what she's talking about, so we're going to follow her psak. We're going to go over and say, listen, can you tell us what to do because you know the law, right? The point is that that's where you get into some gray area because you may be putting her on a pedestal of authority, or the fact is other people say no. There's no positional authority. It is academic authority, which is not positional, and that's not included in the Rambam's problem with it. But that is a problem with the title Rav. Because the title Rav,
gender-based.
So the point is that the title Rav because the title Rav is connected to the ability to be on a Bezdin, because the title Rav is connected to a leadership issue, that's where you get into issues of whether you can use the title. So therefore, there was a lot of things when Rabbi Weiss decided to use the title Rabbah, people had problems with it because Rav also had this professional side to it. Not the clergy rabbi title, but because it had the authority title, because it was a matter of executive leadership, and there was an aspect of being a judge that was connected to it. But Rav also had an aspect of being a teacher, and so forth. That's why Rabbi Michael Broyd brought the issue, says, we need a title then. So they came up with this title Maharat. But the point is then the question of Maharat became problematic because it was tied into the positional title, the professional title. So the Yoetzet Halacha has become more accepted because that's a matter of knowledge. But the truth is it's not a title. What's lacking is that it describes what the woman is, that she has this knowledge, but they haven't given her a title.
I'm very confused.
Yeah.
Is the essence based on two trains? One train says, at the end of the day, a woman cannot be a Rav. Like, is it, like,
yes.
Like, if it's
okay.
impossible, like, can't. I want to go into medicine. No, you can't go into medicine.
No, you see, that's the point.
So sorry.
No.
Enough.
The question is like this. There are two. It's two aspects of the same thing. Okay, where the title has an overlap. Okay, there's the academic side to the title, and then there's the professional side to the title. Okay, the problem is in terms of the professional side to the title, it has what's called shrirus, which is an aspect of authority. According to the Rambam, derived from the law of Melech, and this is the Rambam's derivation from the laws of Melech, he says women can't have authority.
But that's such a blanket
What?
statement.
Pardon?
That's such a blanket statement.
But it's a blanket statement in
yes.
a time when most women were not educated.
But the fact is the Rambam does not take it there. The Rambam is applying the concept in halachic terms. The point is that, and then the question today is where the Rambam really applies authority based upon king. No one has the authority of the king today, because the authority of the king was absolute. So even when you get into the issue of being...
So why compare it to a king?
What?
Why compare it to a king? Because a man can't be a king.
No, the man can be a king.
Now? No,
the point is it's a theoretical definition of what type of authority. What the Rambam is saying is a law that a woman can't be a king. He says that means a woman can't have authority. Okay, can't have a position of authority. The question exists is what is that position of authority? There was a whole question in Ramosha, which I should have looked up before actually. There was a whole question in Ramosha of a woman being a mishkiach. There was a woman whose husband was mishkiach, and he passed away, and the woman wanted to take the position because she needed a livelihood. And Ramosha said it's okay for her to be a mishkiach, because the truth of the matter is that we rely upon women as mishkiach every day. Why? Because we eat in people's homes, right? And the person who's telling you it's kosher or not is the wife, because the husband doesn't know because he's not in the kitchen. So the truth of the matter is what is this definition of authority? So the point is that's where you get into what is the definition of authority and so forth. Now, the controversy that exists in our world today is this definition of authority. The more liberal views within Orthodoxy have a much more stricter definition of the authority that the Rambam would not allow women to occupy. More liberal, and one of the examples, for example, is president of a shul, where you see some Orthodox synagogues have women as presidents of the shul.
I.e. rabbis who allow such and interpret such.
Because they understand that the president of the shul is not an authority figure that the Rambam would prevent a woman from occupying, because that authority is not absolute, because the Rambam derives his law from the absolute authority of the king.
So what authority is absolute in this day and age?
And therefore, with that argument, basically there's a lot of arguments that say that there are very limited situations where women can have that authority. And that's where you get the liberal views within Orthodoxy. Okay, because you don't have it. Now the truth is there's another side that basically reads the authority limitation of the Rambam as much broader. So for example, with the Yoetzet Halacha, basically the argument is that, and this is something that has allowed it to be more acceptable within the world, because basically it says the Yoetzet Halacha will always work under a rabbi who will be the one who will actually give the psak. Okay, but that's a way to actually circumvent the issue by saying she's the one who really knows the situation, really is going to say it, but the psak, in terms of the authoritative statement, comes from the rabbi that she's under.
So it's a Devorah-like situation.
Exactly.
But it's made of straw, and that's why it's not standing anymore. Those definitions, so semantic, that even when you say Selech Harav, and you find a woman who can answer your questions, who sees who you are, so there's an existential element you haven't found with anyone else, but you can't call her Rav. And you know, all the little things that work around it, they won't hold anymore.
So that gets into an issue. So what title should she have? The title Rav does have an indication connected to positions of more absolute authority. And that's why there was such an issue with Rabbi Weiss when he called the person that he ordained Rabbi. The fact that what?
He basically
set
up this whole horrible situation.
Right, and the fact is, the truth is I had another problem. The truth is, I'll tell you my own personal view on this. I think Rabbanit Henkin, in a certain way, has taken steps to protect herself. I knew someone who went to Nishmat, and this person who went to Nishmat was very upset when she got there, because she found that yes, Nishmat had women learning Gemara, but in every other issue she felt that they were basically not taking on any of the women's issues in Nishmat. In other words, they basically towed the party line every other way except for teaching Gemara. Now, to me, I thought that was a way that Rabbanit Henkin ensured the success of her program. She had one issue she wanted to take on. She wanted to say it's okay for women to learn Gemara. She had a lot of support from her husband supported her. Rabbi Yoshever already came out and said it was okay to teach women Gemara. So the fact of the matter is, and she didn't want to take away from this one issue by having any other issue. Okay? And in a certain way, that was her way of being successful. What I felt was problematic, and I thought this was a big mistake, and you can see from this issue, I happen to agree with Rabbi Broid. There is a need for a title. I don't know what the title should be, but there's a need for a title. There's a need to understand the difference, that there is a halachic distinction in terms of professional aspects of women and so forth and so forth, leads to authority, although in many ways it's less of an issue, and I don't have problems with women paskening. There's a minhag chinuch. There's a lot of people say women can pasken. The fact of the matter is that other people don't like it because they say it's an authority figure issue. But the point is that what bothered me was at the discussion of what they have in terms of the title. At that meeting was also some female Reform rabbis, and they made a comment to the extent that the Orthodox are catching up to us. And my position is having individuals there. I don't really care about the Jewish world and so forth and so forth. If you're discussing an Orthodox issue, I don't want Reform rabbis, male or female, in that discussion. That's a different theology. They should not be involved in the discussion. I think that was a big mistake, and I think it really took away from the issue. And I think that, by the way, it takes away from a lot of issues in terms of women in Judaism. I think, for example, that when you have, let's say, partnership minions, or which is on the left wing of Orthodoxy, I would want to make sure that anyone involved in the partnership minion has never, ever, ever done this in a conservative synagogue. In other words, if you landed in a conservative synagogue, you should not be involved with the partnership minion. Okay? I'm making a very emphatic statement.
What exactly is a partnership minion?
Partnership minion is, again, a liberal Orthodox viewpoint, controversial, that pushes the limit on women's involvement. So they'll have women lane because they have a halachic argument for women to lane, but they'll have a mechitza, and they will not have a woman lead certain parts of the service which can't be involved. My position now, the fact is,
Montreal's Maharaj will be speaking at a partnership minion event next Saturday night.
Right here. Yeah. So the point is that that's a liberal Orthodox. That's left-wing Orthodoxy.
That's a clarification question, though.
Yes. By the way, I want to make sure it's not liberal Judaism. It's liberal Orthodoxy,
right.
And there's a lot of controversy over it, and so forth and so forth. My own viewpoint on it is the partnership minion is the person who's the posek of it is Rabbi Daniel Sperber in Eretz Yisrael, and listen. He's bigger than me, put it that way. I'm not going to say whether I'm not giving my own personal views on it. I have my own personal views, but the fact of the matter is I have my own personal views There's a lot of people out there who know a lot more than me, and I'm not going to voice an opinion on whether it's acceptable in the pale or not. I mean, that's, to me, defining the pale of orthodoxy is a very difficult issue. The point is that there's left-wing Orthodox viewpoints, and I'm defining it because that's the way that's the way it is defined. And the point is that, to me, there are issues. And one thing I was saying, though, is that if you're going to work within left-wing Orthodoxy, make sure that you have a strong dividing line from other forms of Judaism to strengthen your position as being Orthodox. Rabbi Henkin did that. And I think that, now that doesn't mean I agree with how strongly she did it. I don't necessarily agree with how, in other ways, more right-wing she may be, but the fact is she did that to ensure that she'd be more accepted. And I think that's something that is necessary. Yeah.
So my clarification question is, you defined a leaning circumstance in a conservative shul.
Yeah, that's not.
If, let's say, you were at a younger age and you participated in leaning at a conservative way,
so now you're a Baal Tshuva.
And now you're
Okay,
a Baal Tshuva, and you've made a commitment to Orthodox Judaism,
Yes.
and you believe in the partnership minion, it's okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought you were saying. But
so going back though, so what?
But the fact is, you want to have that statement. You want to have that statement emphatically made.
Understood.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are people who blur those lines, unfortunately, and unfortunately it then blurs the lines of the acceptance of such a an entity.
Exactly. That's my point.
Understood.
That's my point.
You had a question.
And I want to make it clear that the people behind the partnership minion are totally halakhic. Okay, in the sense of making a statement that this is, from their perspective, totally within the definitions of halacha, as understood by Orthodox principles of halacha. Okay, yeah.
So I'm a little lost, though. Then what is the problem that they leaned in the conservative?
Okay. So I leave that to you.
I'm saying that there are theological distinctions between the conservative movement and the Orthodox movement.
So the rationale for leaning there is different than the rationale.
So my point is an individual who is comfortable in a conservative synagogue without a mechitza and so forth and say, hey, this is fine with me, and now says, okay, last week I laned in this conservative place, this week I'm going to lane in the partnership minion, next week I'll lane in this other conservative place. I would be hesitant to let that person lane in a partnership minion for pragmatic reasons. I'm not getting into halachic issues because let's say a man lanes in the conservative shul, then wants to lane in an Orthodox shul. I'm not getting into other issues. I'm just trying to say on a pragmatic view, if you want to make a statement that this is Orthodox, you want to make it, and I'm basically saying that when I read that in the discussion about what the title should be for the female rabbi, and that there were Reform female rabbis at that discussion, that to me was problematic. This is an Orthodox issue. Okay, I don't want to hear from that theological aspect. But the truth is but what has happened here is you begin to see the issues. Devorah is really part of that issue. Devorah was a woman who had the knowledge. Okay, she couldn't be a dayan. Right? Although, as I said, there's a Tosafos that says yes, that she was, but the fact of the matter is generally, the general psak halacha is she couldn't be a dayan.
But even back in the time of Tosafos, you had people who interpreted differently and said that, yeah, she could be a dayan.
Yeah, what the point is that, but it's a das yachid.
But were they looked at as left-wing?
It's a das yachid in Tosafos.
I remember that you once said,
yes,
I think, that you once said that all of these laws they indicate some psychological difference in gender, which is a hard thing to make such a sweeping statement, but I'm wondering, do you have an understanding psychologically of why women could not be king, or could not have absolute authority?
No, the fact of the matter is that the distinction, it gets to something else. You see, one of the issues that exists here, and it gets, we got very much involved in the definition of rabbi. And I point out the fact that the definition of rabbi gets into, is it an academic title? Is it a professional title? Then what is the nature of that professional title? A lot of these things, and so forth and so forth. The truth is, when you get involved in women in Judaism, you're really dealing with definitions. And the opening definition is how you look at women versus men. Okay? Basically, do you perceive men and women as just human beings? They're people. They're persons. They just happen to have some differences in terms of reproductive organs. That's generally our viewpoint today. That's all persons. Now I can take this further. I said this statement about gay marriage. Gay marriage, underlying that, it's two people in love. It doesn't have to be male and female. It's two people in love. So love doesn't have to be based on gender either. It's just two people. The point is that you get into definitions of two persons. Okay. Now the truth is that are you basically a human being, and then there's a division between male and female human beings, which may just be done to reproduction. Then you have a problem. So why do you have all these different laws based upon these distinctions? Okay. Then comes the other issue, which people don't recognize in terms of a close reading of the Chumash. How was every other male and female created in the Chumash, except for the human male and female? How is it presented in the Chumash? God created them, Zachar and Nekeva, right? Basically, they're created collectively, and it said, and it was created two types of horses, two types of dogs, two types of sheep, and so forth and so forth. The creation of male and female is distinct. Now, the first thing that hits you about that distinct is, first of all, you created male, and then you created female. It's also interesting. The female was not created for reproductive purposes. The female was created for relationship purposes. Okay? Okay? It was created because Adam was lonely, whatever that term lonely means. It was not created for procreation purposes. And the creation was two distinct creations of beings. And then it turns out that when Adam names Chava, it's tied to something to do with procreation. But the fact of the matter is, even the naming is interesting. Adam was involved in what activity when this whole thing comes?
He named all the animals.
Named all the animals. Did he come up with different names for male and female animals?
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah, okay.
He named the camel the camel.
A lion's a lion.
Right? He didn't say there's a lion and a lioness. He named it, but it's even more important to me. Did he come up with different names for each individual animal? He came up with a generic name for the species. When it came to Chava, he came up with a specific name for this one woman. Now the Malbim points this out. He says human beings are never species. Every human being is an individual. So the truth of the matter is, when you start dealing with psychology, when you start dealing with personality, are you dealing with species, or are you dealing with individual? And then how do you put male and female into the mix? When you say someone is a good mother, does that mean because she's a woman she's a good mother, or is it that person, that personality, this is the mothering of that person? The fact of the matter is that when we get into an individual human being, you have to deal with individuality, and then you have to deal with male-female distinction, and then you have to deal with other distinctions, such as Kohen and Levi and stuff like that, from a Jewish perspective, or Jew and non-Jew, whatever way you want to do that. But these are all difficulties in understanding it. The truth is, the halachic distinction between men and women, years ago, when you talk in terms of the Middle Ages, or prior to that, when people perceived men and women as very different, then you threw out all these answers. Nowadays, when we don't see them as different, then you're left with the situation. So how do you deal with it from a halachic perspective?
People don't see a difference. Why is everyone so sympathetic to transgender concerns?
So the truth is that's the interesting thing that we've come back from. The fact is that in the 60s, when the women's liberation movement started, it was very much everyone's a human being. Almost to the extent that the only difference was procreation. It's very interesting about how the women's liberation movement was very much tied to the sexual revolution, where women said, hey, listen, we want to be sexually promiscuous as men. Because basically it got to a point where there should be no differences between men and women except for procreation or some reproductive aspect of their body, to the extent that you even had same-sex washrooms, like there should be no distinction. The point is that there was a reaction to that with books like Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, where there was a reaction to it that says, wait a second, we are now seeing that men and women have psychological distinctions. And then you get into the whole transgender thing, where you get into it, well, I'm a female even though my body parts are male, which really reflects the fact that, well, what is a male and what is a female? Now, halachically, we don't buy the idea that if you have body parts of a male that you're female, but on the other hand, what do you do psychologically with it? And the truth is, it raises a lot of issues. But the point is that when you deal with women in Judaism, you're really, in our world today, dealing with a real difficult issue of what really is the difference between men and women. And you can't simply determine. I once had someone say to me, when I quoted Nechama Leibowitz, and the person was a person I respected, a very sweet individual, right? And I remember quoting Nechama Leibowitz, and he looked at me and said, "What are you quoting Nechama Leibowitz? What does she know? She's a woman." And I basically said, "Whoa." But it was an older man. He came from a more right-wing background, and I just looked at him and said, "Okay, I'm not going to go there." But the fact of the matter is that that's an easy way of dealing with the issue. If you're going to sit there and say women can't think anyway, so it's an easy way of saying they can't become scholars. But if you're going to see women who are scholars and really know what they're talking about and really having intelligence, then you're obviously having to come up with, well, what does it mean? You talk about Adis, you talk about Dianas, and so forth. The fact of the matter, it really makes it much more difficult. But the point is that, or even authority, and these are all part of that issues. But the fact is, I guess what it comes down to in terms of the Maharat issue is that, to me, there's an issue in how we can relate to female Torah scholars. And I don't like leaving it as doctor. I would like to come up with a term that indicates within the Jewish world that this is a person who is deserving of respect for their Torah knowledge, and obviously has a voice because of their Torah knowledge. Now, then we get into issues of the problems with the extent of their voice in terms of authority and so forth.
And also their community perception.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that in everyone's world, everyone's world referred to women as Rebbitzins. Everyone's a Rebbitzin. And every time I see the term Rebbitzin being used for the personal statement of authority, and the fact that matters, but that's not the term, but you really are looking for a term to be able to relate to this woman with respect because she has shown the authority.
Why not eliminate all the titles?
The labels?
Because then you don't have. Then what usually happens is on respect.
You said they didn't have it. Yeshua was Yeshua.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. I mean, the fact is, I've dealt with that issue a lot, and the fact is the reality is that even though I'm much more comfortable being called by my first name, the fact is that people basically have instructed me that I can't that I have to refer to myself as Rabbi because ain't going to work otherwise. I mean, Nechama was able to do it, but you saw the way Nechama was. You basically, before you walked into her classroom, you knew who you were dealing with. Yeah.
Right. If I can ask, do you think the time is approaching within Orthodox Judaism for a revision of thought different than the Rambam? Meaning how...
That's a halachic question.
Pardon?
That's a halachic question. It's a matter of, as long as you're Orthodox, you have to work within halachic reasoning. The fact is that the truth is everyone quotes the Rambam and it's become authoritative. I have to see what the other Rishonim write and so forth. I really have to do a lot of investigation.
So it still devolves back.
Because that's the nature of Orthodoxy.
Understood.
Right.
Well, but even within Orthodoxy, if you get to the point of not baked in the 70.
Sanhedrin.
Sanhedrin.
That's only if it's a Drabanan. It's not if the fact of the matter is you still have to work within the principles of Orthodoxy.
Okay,
I have been in situations with individuals. Mm-hmm. You're talking to a person. Ask all my kids. I'll quote to them a lot of different shittas of leniencies, and they ask me a shaila, and they always ask me, how come? Why don't you follow that shita? Why don't you follow that shita? And the fact is, because that's the way I paskin. What do you want? And my kids learned along. They told me my kids learned along that I generally in psak more machmir than a lot of people that I've had I remember a woman coming up to I remember someone coming up to me about this. It was actually a guy and someone asked me a question, and I said, don't ask me, ask this other rabbi in town. And someone came up to me and said, why? You don't respect that? Of course I respect that rabbi. So he said, well, why don't you? Because I don't paskin that way. He paskins that way. So go ask that question. You want me to change the nature of how I paskin and so on? Psak is a certain...
Thus your answer does not surprise me.
The psak is a certain understanding of how psak works and so forth, and you have to come to a certain conclusion. And that's the reality of Orthodoxy. Just because there's a shita that says A doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to follow that shita. And there's a lot of factors involved in how you come to a psak. The question of what you're asking is a matter where that's the nature of psak, and it's the nature of how psak works, and so forth. I mean, the fact is psak is more dynamic than a lot of people think it is, and it's less dynamic than a lot of people think it is. But I remember one rabbi pointing out that it took 100 years before they came to the conclusion they're going to have a Hanukkah. Okay, it didn't just happen overnight.
Right. I mean, there has been hundreds of years of evolution.
And the fact is that certain things that you take in terms of wigs, right? When wigs first came out, shachtim who were married to women who wore wigs were not accepted by many people as to be shachtim anymore. Because they were, you're talking about, they wore wigs that totally covered their heads. Their husbands were considered not worthy to be shoftim anymore because they wore wigs, because it was a whole issue. Nowadays, the halach has developed where women, so the point is there are dynamic movements in this. There are issues. The point is that you have to see how things, but the fact is it all works within the system. And the system has methodology. There's arguments and so on and so on. It doesn't mean that everything's going to change. It doesn't think things move. And the problem with the conservative movement is that the conservative movement had a methodology that not the modern conservative movement. We're talking about people, from the late 1800s, who on the surface were pretty frum. Their methodology was not. What happened was they leaned too much towards the leniency and so forth. You wanted to make a statement.
So you're saying, please correct me. So you're saying that women can have the knowledge.
Yes.
Okay. They're not allowed to paskin on anything.
No. If they have the knowledge, I think they can paskin. Where it comes to
at an authoritative level, though,
that's where you get into issues with being a Rav. A woman who has the knowledge, who's asked questions of knowledge, I don't see that to be a problem. I think there's some people who feel that to be a problem. I don't see it to be a problem. But once she's put into a position where it's authoritative, that's where it becomes somewhat more of an issue.
And the authoritative level is because the Rambam said that it can't be a king.
Right, and that was extended by the Rambam to any authoritative situation.
So the kingship was relative to at what time period in history? Because we do have queens that are...
Yeah, every time there's a queen, the question exists of why there was a queen. And sometimes it becomes the issue with Devorah, in the sense that there's a queen who's accepted as a queen, who's actually, I forget her name, oh shoot, I should remember her name. In the Hashmonaim dynasty there was a queen who was accepted, and a lot of it, what?
Not Vashti.
No, but the fact is that a lot of it had to do with Harad Shah, because with the necessity of having her as queen, because the alternative was someone who was more problematic
It's an excuse. It's an excuse. Basically, they've been designated as the head of state, right? And they have the authority to make those decisions.
Right, but the fact is that if your choice is whether the person who's going to make the decision is a observant woman who will apply halacha and so forth, or you can get a man who basically is some idolater or some, in those days, a Sadducee or something like that, then you get in situations where you have what's called the Harad Shah situation, which is an emergency situation where you basically say, listen, we violate this law in order for the better needs of Torah. So I believe, I forget who it was, but I believe that was one of the arguments that was presented with her, in the sense that the alternative was a greater problem. Right? So the point is that's always going to be an issue as well. Okay?
It sets a precedent, though, right?
It does. I mean, the fact of the matter is, but you know something? One of the issues that exists that a lot of people don't want to recognize is that we aren't dogmatic and we're not black and white. You have to have some type of reality of a situation. In other words, you got to know what is. You have to have some sense of, like, let me give you another example. An example that exists. There was a idolatrous cult in Florida who wanted to sacrifice animals, and was in violation of some pro-animal rights legislation in Florida. So they argued freedom of religion. We should allow idolatrous sacrifices. America should let us do our idolatrous sacrifices. Every Orthodox public policy organization, from Aguda to, from what I understand, from the Aguda to the OU, intervened in that case on the side of the idolaters. Okay? That they should be allowed to bring their idolatrous sacrifices, okay, because of freedom of religion. Now, why do you think they did this? And the point is, is that you're supporting idolatry. What do you think? Well, let's understand this. And the issue here is Mila, is Shchita. You've already had rumblings of people saying, no Mila, it's no Shchita. They say, no, freedom of religion. So they all intervene on the side of the idolaters. And did they recognize that it was somewhat ludicrous? Yes, because there was a greater public policy necessity. So the truth is public policy is also a very significant role. I mean, listen, Purim is coming up, right? Okay? Esther made a tremendous public policy decision. She went in to sleep with a non-Jewish king in order to save the Jewish people. That was a major public policy decision that she made, with consequences to her own personal life. But we are not. We do have public policy considerations, which then override. Now, the truth is, and I could take it one step further, that you get into certain public policy issues that then yield into, okay, does that become the norm? So, for example, women learning. I'm not just talking about women learning Gemara. Women learning. Okay, STEM, the Beis Yaakov system. Okay, that was presented as a public policy necessity. A lot of people said, no, women should not go to school. Women do not have to learn, even don't have to learn Chumash. Okay, if you look at the Rambam, he's very much against the study of Torah Sheba'al Peh, but he actually extends it, really says women should not study. Okay, now, women are all learning all over the place. Even the most right-wing institutions, maybe not in Satmar, but women throughout the world are learning very advanced Parshanut and so forth, in the most right-wing Beis Yaakovs and so forth and so forth. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you look back to the original arguments, includes the Chavetz Chaim and includes other people who argued, it was all Hara Shah argument. Given the situation now, it's a public policy necessity for women to at least study Chumash. Point is that how many people would go up to today and say, listen, go up to women today, even the most right-wing women today, and say, if you went onto a desert island where there was nothing else, and you were going to establish a community totally absent anything, would you have schools for girls? And I say, of course you would. Because it's become, the public policy is now served. Now the truth is that's because the argument, even not from public policy arguments, there's arguments for women to study and so forth. The fact is there's real issues in the Rambam statements and so forth and so forth. There's a question back in the Gemara, but the point is that, and that touches upon your idea as well. The Rambam makes very powerful statements about women and learning, but the fact of the matter is there's other people who make statements as well, and issues even back to the Gemara and the Rambam. So the fact is, it's very much a world. We're living in a world that's going through a tremendous amount of change and a tremendous amount of.
The Supreme Court recently just made a bigger one.
So why doesn't the authority thing evolve?
Pardon?
Why doesn't the issue of authority?
It might, but it has to evolve within halachic definitions, which would be.
But a man can't have absolute rights like a king.
And that might be.
A man that can have the same rights as a king.
No. The fact is you can't have that anywhere. Our world.
You can't have it for a man either.
So the point is, it doesn't exist anymore. Right. We don't have that type of.
Why then apply it only to women?
No, the point is that becomes part of the issue. Yeah. The halachic definition is a certain type of authority. In other words, the Rambam was talking about a certain type of authority, which was an absolute aspect of authority. Now we're living in a world where no one has that authority anymore. So the point is then the issue comes, so how do women now apply to it? So the point is there you have disagreements, where you still have a level of authority, so how do you understand the Rambam? But the point is that that's where you have people saying, well, if it doesn't match the same authority the Rambam was talking about, then there's no prohibition on women having that type of authority. And that's the beginning of that argument. That's the beginning of that argument, as will change.
There's no question. Nobody ever disagrees. Every Jew has to be an Eved Hashem.
Yes.
To be a true Eved Hashem, you have to have information. We're not an obscurantist.
Absolutely.
So somewhere along the line.
So that's a tremendous argument on the Rambam's attitude towards women in the study of Torah to begin with.
Maybe we're not understanding the Rambam.
Well, the point is that the Rambam's pretty emphatic in what he says, but the problem even within the Rambam, I mean, I've asked this question. The only other person I saw who asked this question was, I think, Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, who's a Rav on Long Island, who basically points out a steer in the Rambam. Okay, the Rambam says women can't learn. The truth is, if you look at the language of the Rambam, he doesn't say women can't learn. He says, and it's very specific in the language of the Rambam. The Rambam is you can't teach women. A lot of people are saying you can't teach women the same way as you teach your son. Okay, it's a very interesting language in the Rambam.
So
but he points out, but
men.
it's actually directed in terms of education. But the fact is that if you look at the Rambam statement earlier in Hilchos Deos, he basically says that the ultimate knowledge you have to have is what the Rambam calls pardes, so basically you have to know about God. It's knowledge of God. It's philosophy, the Rambam's idea. And he says, and you have to learn you have to learn the what is it? You have to learn the Tiyutas of Abai and Rabbi. You have to learn Abai, the Gemara, which develops our thought processes in order to be able to learn philosophy. That seems to be what the Rambam says in Hilchos Deis. And then he says everyone has this obligation to become knowledgeable of God, men and women. So if men and women have to have this obligation, to have this knowledge of God, and the only way you can gain this knowledge of God is through proficiency in the study of Gemara, that seems to imply women have to learn Gemara. So I had this question once in the Rambam. I saw Moshe Weinberger ask the same question, but the fact is the Rambam says that women should learn Gemara, but the truth is, in Rambam's language is an aspect of teaching them. The truth is that, and that's only the Rambam. The point is that other people developed other arguments, so forth and so forth. The truth is, there is dynamic movement in halacha, but you have to work within the halachic system. You can't just turn around and say, hey, the world's different, let's change it. You have to work it through in terms of halacha and values.
You can't say there's dynamic movement when there was a backward movement. Before Rambam, we had very outstanding women.
Who?
Well, first, just in the Chumash, you don't see a huge distinction.
Who was it? I mean, besides Puria, I mean, we were talking to people also. I mean, if you look at Of All My Children Shall Be Learned, which is a book by...
Rambam took us back.
The fact of the matter is the Rambam may have taken positions. You have to see what other Rishonim do. I mean, the fact is, why the Rambam's voice became so dominant is an issue. But the fact of the matter is, it's Shulchan Aruch passes this way. But the point is, if you look in terms of you really study all the various commentaries, you see that it's a little bit more difficult to understand than people think it is. It's not so simple.
But it was men had the ability to say yes or no to anything at that time.
But the fact is,
they were maintaining a situation that was to their advantage.
You know,
they still do, but they can't do it so much.
But
anymore.
The fact is that what people don't recognize, and this is something, if you read this book, All My Children Shall Be Learned by Shoshana Zolti, she talks about women scholars and how there were women scholars. Rashi's 2 daughters, you know. The point is there were women scholars. But the truth of the matter is that how many women wanted to study? I mean, if you really look at it, how many men really want to be Talmidei Chacham? You know, all these men are going to Daf Yomi, spending an hour a day going to Daf Yomi, and it's a great activity. But the fact of the matter is, how many are really, you know, involved in learning and so forth and so forth? You know, the fact. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay Daf Yomi. The fact is what I'm saying, how many people really want to spend hours to learn and be involved in learning and really are learning all the time and so forth and so forth? The fact is, women who did that, listen, Maral and Prague's wife was the one who edited all his Sforim. Okay? She edited all his Sforim. And she wrote somewhere that she had to make some corrections. The Maral got 6 or 7 places where he quoted the source incorrectly. You have to excuse him, he was so involved in his thought, he got the source wrong.
He's human.
Yeah, she knew the source.
She got it.
She knew better.
She corrected all the things. The truth of the matter is that you had women scholars. The point is that, and even the Rambam understood that there were individual women who were scholars. The point is that when you look at all these things, the fact is that we're going through a change. I mean, the fact is that it's only within the last 100 years that women have become scholars in their own right in the general world. Okay. Most women back in the turn of the 20th century, okay, women didn't want to vote. You know, a lot of women said, no, we don't want to vote. Men should want them. I mean, the fact is that you know, a lot of women fought among themselves in certain things. The truth is that we're going through a shift, and now halacha has to deal with it. Halacha is a system that will deal with it, that does deal with it, but it deals with it within its own language. But your question that you mentioned beforehand is essentially it. Halacha does have a distinction between men and women. It's just by definition. Halacha has that distinction. And we have a problem with that distinction, but we also recognize in our world today, people are recognizing a nature of that distinction. Okay, that men and women are different. Okay, 50 years ago, the argument of women's lib was no difference. Now we're saying a difference, but it's really difficult to really define the difference in a way that is not simplistic, which is the way everyone made difference beforehand. Anyways, I'm sorry if we...
When Yeshua became the leader, he didn't become a leader because he knew so much, because Moses gave him the Ruach HaKodesh. Depart on him the Ruach HaKodesh.
Who said that Yeshua?
One second.
Yeshua didn't become a leader because he didn't know so much?
Nevi'im. The Nevi'im.
Okay, one sec. We're going to have a disagreement here.
Okay.
Yeshua was the foremost Talmud of Moshe. Okay?
Yeah, where is it written there?
He was the Midrashim all point to the fact that he sat beside Moshe all the time. He was in the Beis Medrash all the time. It was because he was the foremost Talmud that Moshe suggested.
My mistake. What about all the Nevi'im?
So then you get into how they became a Navi. So the fact is, when they talk about the name Nevi'im, it's they all learned.
They all learned and became Nevi'im?
Yes. They all learned to become... The Rambam says to become a Navi you have to be a Chacham. And they were all talking about the name Nevi'im, which implies that they were all involved in some type of learning. And then a few of them had the schus of the Kodesh Baruch Hu actually giving him Nevuah. But Nevuah, what?
So what's the difference between Navi and Rav?
So the truth is you're getting into a real tough question.
Because to my impression, which I'm a simple person, Nevi'im had some kind of a connection of knowledge that's really not coming from knowledge, but they have Ruach HaKodesh. Here today, Ruach HaKodesh seems to disappear. I don't see a person that said I can say... My
understanding is the way you became a Navi is first you were a Rav. In other words, Yirmiyahu, Yoshiyahu, Amos, Natan HaNavi, Eliyahu. The first thing they did is they became big Talmidei Chachamim. They were unbelievable scholars in their own right. And then, as the Rambam puts it, is that then once you went as far as you can in the Chachma of the human of our human life, there is a certain people were zocha to a knowledge beyond that after they already reached the heights of Chachma. Now, the truth is that, and I don't want to get into this because I have to. There's a whole issue that after Nevuah ended, it says that the power of authority came to Tamei Chachamim, and then there's issues that say Tamei Chachamim might be might be greater than Nevi'im. In other words, that Chachmas Torah through Torah knowledge is greater than even Nevuah. There is that perception with the Torah. The idea of Ruach HaKodesh, it's a schus that's granted to certain individuals, but Chachma is I mean, you see this. I mean, there's stories of people who wanted Ruach HaKodesh, and there's stories of individuals who said, like, who was it who was offered he was offered to learn with an angel, and he said no. Was that the Gra? The Vilna Gaon, I think. The Vilna Gaon was offered to learn with an angel, and he said no. I want to work it on my own. So the fact is that there's a whole value of Limud Torah from working on your own.
In our
There was
earthly
a story
world.
with Rabbi
What?
Nachman.
What?
There was a story with Rabbi Nachman.
Nachman Breslov? Yeah, Nachman Breslov was much more being Hasidish, who's more considered more. I mean, this is one of the big disagreements between the Hasidish world and the more Misnagdish world. But the fact of the matter is that there are for sure people who when they were offered, here, we'll give you Ruach HaKodesh, say no, let me work it out on my own. I mean, the fact is that it's not so, but for sure. Okay, I'm not going to say everyone, but for sure, according to the Rambam, to be a Navi, you have to be a Chacham. Right? You didn't. The Rambam said. The Rambam
it's by default. If you have Ruach HaKodesh, you obviously.
No, before you got it. In other words,
so a simple person cannot get
no. That seems to be according to the Rambam. Ruach HaKodesh was not just given. Once you were already, yeah.
What about when they built the Mishkan, and there were a few individuals who had to build the utensils. They didn't have the knowledge themselves, and Hashem gave them the Ruach.
Yeah, but they already were. I mean, the fact of the matter is Betzalel was already big in his own right.
But Oholiab?
What? Yeah. They were big in their own right. They had talent in their own right.
They had talent.
And the knowledge was, there was specific knowledge that they had, but they had to have as much knowledge as they possibly could. Okay. And then there's the addition. Okay? I mean, our understanding of Moshe Rabbeinu was he was something before Kodesh Baruch Hu ever gave him Ruach. Yeshua spent his whole time in Moshe Rabbeinu's base medrash. Eliyahu Navi they asked questions where Eliyahu Navi paskin. Not only that, in terms of psak, you're not allowed to use Ruach HaKodesh in terms of psak. So they asked Eliyahu Navi. They asked a lot of times. He said, what about this case? Eliyahu paskin. He didn't go through Nevuah because you can't paskin from Nevuah. You can't use Ruach HaKodesh in psak.